What's up, Net Soldiers? I'm the Lion, so welcome back to another video. So today I'm going to be ranking all 8 of the Mandalorian episodes from worst to best, and I'm actually not alone today. Today, I'm actually with Starkiller5555. He's been a fan of mine for a long time, and he's actually an up-and-coming YouTuber now himself. So if you guys want to check him out, I'll leave a link to his channel in the description below.
What's up, Net Soldiers? For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Starkiller5555. I've been a long-time fan of Net Alliance, and before I give my ranking, I must say a huge thank you to Net for allowing me to do this collaboration. This is a dream come true for me, and I'm a fanboy for a second, but like, thank you so much.
So I guess the easiest way to do this is to kind of start with like my number 8, and then we'll do his number 8, and then I'll do my number 7, and we'll do his number 7, you know, and we'll just keep going on and on like that until we get to the end. So if you guys enjoy this video and you want to see more, please want to like and subscribe, turn notifications, all that good stuff. Now with that said, let's begin. Alright, starting at number 8, I think the worst episode of The Mandalorian is also the only episode that I think is just, like, okay. With that said, it's still decent, it's just okay, and that is episode 4. So the big thing for me is I'm actually a fan of the idea of, you know, the hero rides into town, he finds some natives who need his help, and then he teaches them how to fight for themselves, and then together they take down a threat. We've seen this type of plot in Avatar. We've seen it in, of course, the original Avatar, Dances with Wolves. And it's kind of depicted in a lot of other ways too, but I would say the best way, if anything, this was definitely more reminiscent of Dances with Wolves than any other movie off the top of my head, of course. I guess you could say The Last Samurai is kind of like that too, but it all depends on how you want to picture it. And at the end of the day, while I do like that story element, the way that some movies and you know, TV shows go like that route sometimes, it's cool to pay homage to that story because that is an interesting story beat to hit. I feel like it wasn't executed the best way it could. Ultimately, I guess my biggest gripe would be that it just felt very formulaic compared to some of the other episodes, which of course you knew The Mandalorian was going to get through. You know what I mean? We knew he was going to get from episode 1 to the last episode. But a big part of that was the characters and the different things that actually happen inside the story are dynamic, and they pull you in, and you want to see what happens next. With this episode, as soon as I started, things just kind of got a little too familiar, and I could predict the entire thing. So that's why I think this episode is rough. Still good, but yeah, it's a little rough.
Coming in at absolute last place, I have episode 4. Now, this kind of felt like filler content to me. Sure, it did have some good Baby Yoda jokes, but the only reason I feel like this is even worth watching, is that it introduces the Shock Trooper, which is later in episode 7 and 8. But other than that, it doesn't really have a whole lot to it. It's just not really that good.
Alright, coming in at number 7, we have episode 5. So my biggest complaint with this episode, I think overall, this episode is fine. My biggest complaint is that this is the one where they started to rely a little bit too much on like the fan service stuff. And I get that. It's cool to do like fan service things, and I think from that point on, you know, The Mandalorian did have a couple little fan service here and there, but this episode definitely had a little too much. And I think a big deal of that was when they returned to Tatooine and they actually go to Mos Eisley and they're in the cantina, and it's cool to see all that type of stuff, but I do think that they wrote the story to kind of get them to that point that they can be like, hey guys, remember this? Hey guys, remember this? So instead of adding the story in naturally, it kind of feels like it's too fan servicey. And here's the thing, I'm okay with fan service. There's a lot of people who really hate it. I'm okay with it. I think if it's done tastefully and it actually adds to the story, makes the characters, you know, it's more compelling for all the characters, I'm cool with that. But there are some times when it does seem like it's a little too much, and I think this one might have been a teeny bit too much, but I don't know. Some people actually do like this episode a lot, so there are some really cool things in it. It's cool to kind of see like this other bounty hunter kind of like track him down, and of course it doesn't work out for her. But it's cool to see that, and it'd be interesting to see how that would kind of evolve, but then she dies. So it's like, I guess that's that. But yeah, like I said, besides episode 4 of The Mandalorian, all the rest of the episodes are good. It's just some are better than others. So that's why we're making this list.
Coming in at number 7, we have episode 5. Now, again, this kind of feels more like filler content. It does have more of an original trilogy feel to it, it being in Mos Eisley and everything. But the guild member and the bounty hunter, I don't remember what either of those names are. Sorry. They're really, honestly, forgettable. And I don't know, they're just not really that good.
Okay, so coming in at number 6, we have episode 6. Now for me, while I do like this episode, like I said, I like all the episodes, but while I do like this one, it feels kind of flat. There's not really any story element for the Mandalorian in a way. There's a lot of other story points for other characters, but our main character, who is the Mandalorian, he's just kind of pushed aside and thrown into another person's story for this episode, and that's okay, but it does kind of feel like a little bit of a disconnect if you watch the episodes. I think it's cool to kind of introduce this group dynamic, like you see with these thugs, you know, these I guess you could say space pirate people, and some of them are really scary, and it makes you wonder, like, you know, what are the extra stories that go along with them, and you're interested to see what happens next with them, but then if you watch to the end, you're like, oh, I guess that kind of didn't really go anywhere. And I think for that reason, it's kind of a lost story thread. It feels like they wanted to get to the finale, but they needed another episode, so they made this one. And I don't know if that's true. It kind of feels the same way as how episode 4 felt. It feels like it is a bridge episode. It doesn't really feel like it's an actual compelling story episode. So that just might be me, but that's how I feel. Now, with that said, it is actually cool to see actual bad guys that aren't just Sith and just like criminal people. It's cool to see that other dynamic that we don't really get to see in the movies. So I do enjoy that. I think that's cool, but it does feel like The Mandalorian is just another piece of another person's story in this episode. And for me, I think that kind of pulls it back a little bit.
Coming in at number 6, we have episode 6. Now, I actually like this episode. I almost said film. It had great action scenes. It had great cameos by Matt Letner and Dave Filoni. But my big problem is the Twi'leks. I want to know more about the Twi'leks. Maybe in season 2 we'll get more backstory, but as of now, like, we have nothing. So, like, I want to know more. Hopefully in season 2 we do get something.
Alright, so coming in at number 5, I actually have episode 8. So for me, while I did like this episode, I do feel like it was kind of lacking in some parts here and there. Not a lot, not like a massive deal, but it didn't really feel like it was as good as it could have been. I understand the idea that they didn't want to kind of throw everything at the wall because it's the end of the first season and they don't want to, you know, hit us with an amazing ending of the first season and not be able to pick it up in the second season. I get that. Shows do that. They kind of add like a little buffer timing and elements to allow them to make like a better show as it goes on and continues. And that's cool, but it does kind of feel like there's something missing. Now, I liked a lot of elements about it. You can definitely tell that Taika Waititi, you can tell he directed this episode. And there are a lot of interesting, funny moments, but there are some times where it's like, all right, cool to see the humor. I'm getting a little bit of a Thor Ragnarok vibe here, you know what I mean? Like, I don't mind humor. I like when things are funny, but I also like when things are actually serious, like they're supposed to be. And I feel like he takes some elements sometimes, and we're in this serious moment, and then he'll make a joke out of it, and it's like, that's not like the respectful way to go with this story. It's funny, but it's not respectful to the characters and the events you just established. So that's kind of how like Taika Waititi goes. A lot of people like his style of directing, and that's okay. I understand that, but I think that when you're doing comedy, it's okay to be subtle as well as continuing the dramatic point of view of the story. So I think that ultimately, while it is interesting, it does kind of make the episode stand out more. It does pull it back for me because it's not as dynamic as some of the other ones I'm going to be mentioning later on.
Okay, at number 5, we have episode 2. Now, most people put this episode lower. Like, when I talk to most people, they put it at, like, number 7 above episode 4. Now, I honestly like it. Again, it had more of an OT feel to it. It just didn't have that good of a story, though. Kind of felt like episode 1.5. Well, I mean, that is kind of what episode 2 feels like for everything. Like episode 1, part 2, I mean... But you know what I mean. Episode 3 should have been the real episode 2, and then episode 2 should have been part of episode 1. But, of course, they had to have the Baby Yoda cliffhanger, so, I mean, that's fine. That's fine. I still love it. But, just saying.
Alright, at number 4 we have episode 2. Now, this one is... I think the biggest thing for me for this episode is why I like it and why I think it isn't the greatest still, is because... there are points in this episode where it feels like the Mandalorian is being established more, but this part feels like a part 2 to episode 1's part 1. And what I mean by that is like episode 1 and episode 2, they feel like they're kind of the same episode, just like split, compared to the other episodes that are all kind of their own standalone stories. It's kind of like how I mentioned Rocky 1 and Rocky 2. You know, they're both good films, it's just Rocky 2 feels like it is the second part of Rocky 1 and not really like its own standalone story. So if you put them right next to each other, they work that way. And that's how I kind of feel like episode 1 and episode 2 of this series is.
Okay, moving on to number 4, we have episode 7. Now, this is one of the final episodes, obviously, and it sets up Moff Gideon, which is a very interesting character. I'm super excited to see what he does in Season 2. But we get the return of Shock Trooper, the IG unit, and Quail. Originally I thought it was Quail, but the Quail is the bird. But Quail. Yay, we get all those returning characters. I mean, the Shock Trooper I don't really care about, but Quail and the IG droid, 2 of the best characters.
Alright, coming in at number 3, I actually have episode 1. Now for me, I think that episode 1 had a very important job to do. It needed to establish the world again. It needed to show us that this was going to be a different scenario compared to what we've seen in the Star Wars sequels so far and what Disney has produced so far. And it needed to make us want to keep watching. Those are 3 very important things. There's of course other factors, but those are the 3 important things. And for me, I think it succeeded. This gave me something I've been waiting for. I mean, I don't necessarily hate the sequels like a lot of other people do, but I did feel a little let down because it felt like the people in charge didn't truly respect the lightsaber that was given to them. Insert the clip with Luke throwing the lightsaber right now. So yeah, we're introduced to the Mandalorian. He eventually runs into the IG unit near the end. We don't get much on his character, but we know that there is something compelling behind him, pushing him and making him the character he is. And then in the end, Baby Yoda shows up. And that changes everything. I think it's an interesting dynamic to make a character who is so used to just doing what he's got to do to make credits, and then throwing in a child out of nowhere, something innocent, something he has to protect now, and it gives him more purpose, and it's interesting to see how his character handled that. So ultimately, what the biggest job that this episode had to do was make me return for episode 2, and it did that. So gotta give credit where credit's due.
In number 3 is episode 1. Now, this is a great beginning to a great show. It shows a real Mandalorian, excuse yourself, Boba Fett. The first time in live action we get a real Mandalorian. And how can I mention episode 1 of The Mandalorian without mentioning Baby Yoda? I mean, the only thing that could have been better if it was Baby Jar Jar. It also introduces the IG droid, which is later revealed in episode 7 to be reprogrammed and such. But I just love it. It's a great episode.
Okay, so coming in at number 2, I actually have episode 3. So the reason why I have episode 3 compared to other episodes right now is because for me, I like the idea. This was the point where the Mandalorian really truly showed the character he's supposed to be, right? Episode 1 and 2 is kind of like showing who he was in a way, but also kind of showing the character he is going to eventually be, and not really knowing if he can be the person he's supposed to be, or not really knowing who he is supposed to be. So episode 3 was the one where he decided that he was going to not only save the child, but he was going to protect it forever. And you know, that's so cool. Like, that was the day that he decided he was going to be a father. And I think maybe that's just because maybe there's a little bit of a father thing with me too, with my daughter. It's one of those things, like, you know, before my daughter was born, and I'm not going to try to make this sappy or whatever, but before my daughter was born, I really thought I knew what love was until I saw that little baby looking at me, you know what I mean? And then at that point, I knew what love really was, and I would do anything to protect her. And I think that's kind of what the Mandalorian felt. It wasn't exactly love, but he saw something innocent and he wanted to do the right thing. And that is what makes a hero. Because even though he knew that stepping in and doing the right thing for Baby Yoda was going to negatively affect himself, it was the right thing to do, and that's what a hero does. The hero does the right thing, regardless if it's supposed to be bad for him or if it puts himself in danger or anything like that. He does the right thing because that's what a hero does. And personally, that's why I think that this episode is one of the best, because you see that turn. You know, he's actually contemplating to himself, should I just keep on going and let this child probably die? Or should I do the right thing and save it? It's just one of those interesting, more deeper, like, moral questions. And I think that this episode does a really good job of showing him and making us see him as the hero we're supposed to see him as. Now, of course, he isn't perfect yet, and we find that out as the episodes go on, but he is trying, and this is the episode that really makes him seem like he's trying. So I gotta give props to that.
Number 2, we have episode 8. Now, this is an excellent conclusion to the series. Well, not the series, the season. It has great action scenes. We see Mando unmasked. We see Pedro Pascal. The Darksaber. I freaked out when I saw that. Like, wow. But it ends the season on a positive note, and I'm very excited to see what they do for season 2.
And coming in at my number 1, I have episode 7. So the reason why I think episode 7 is my personal favorite is because it is the episode that brings the characters back to the point where they're supposed to be. A lot of the other episodes had storylines where they kind of were going nowhere. They introduced characters that didn't do anything, you know what I mean? And I think this was the point where, like, the show actually came back. You know, we come back to the doctor who is going to inspect the child. You know, we had all these different elements, these different characters that he met through this story come back and all meet at a head point. And it's cool to see that. Sorry, I just got a text message that threw me off my thought process. All right, I'm back on. Let's do this. I also think that this was the first episode since, like, episode 1 to truly raise the stakes. Episode 1 ended with him discovering Baby Yoda and setting him on his path. And this episode is about him finally realizing, you know, the character he's supposed to be, and not only accepting Baby Yoda as, like, kind of like his own kid, but also making sure that he'll do anything to save him. Like I mentioned about my last one, this is another example of that, but it also ends with Quill dying, and that is the saddest death in a long time. Here's the thing, a lot of people, they like Quill. I don't think anyone necessarily loves him, but I personally think he was an awesome character. I think he added a really good, like, wisdom part to the crew. I like that he was kind of like the pilot slash mechanic to their squad that they were kind of setting up, and that was cool. But then things just kind of didn't work out, and Quill died. And that was sad. And I think ultimately that episode not only was good all the way through, but the ending made me go, oh my gosh, not Quill, you know what I mean? So I guess ultimately this episode just made me think the most. It made me feel the most, and it's the one I can remember the best. So I'm guessing that probably is my favorite episode, because ultimately, guys, like I've said in the beginning of my video, every single one of these episodes are good. Even episode 4 is decent. Like, it's not bad. There are no bad Mandalorian episodes, in my opinion. But like I said, some are more rough than others. But there are ones that are really good. So, yeah.
My all-time favorite episode of The Mandalorian, episode 3. Now, this episode for me, while it doesn't have a lot of story, I love it for its character moments. Like, in the first 2 episodes, Mando's kind of like, I mean, he's there, but, like, he doesn't really have a whole lot of emotion to him. But in this episode, like, he shows his emotion towards Baby Yoda. He acts like the father figure. He'll go at any risk to save him. And I just think that's I just love it. And the Mandalorian, like, clan, oh my god, that was the best part of the episode. The best part. Like, we see Mando in full Beskar armor now. Then we see the full clan. And oh my god, how long I have been waiting to see a Mandalorian clan in live action. Like, you can't even believe it. Like, that was my favorite part of the episode. If you enjoyed my ranking, consider leaving a like. And maybe going over to my channel and hitting that subscribe button. Yeah, that's all I have to say for you guys. Ned, you can continue with your outro, but peace, guys.
That is it for our list. Thank you guys for watching. What are your lists? How would you rank these? Let us know in the comments below. Like I said, guys, if you want to check out Starkiller5555's videos, I'll leave links to his videos in the description below. But thanks again for watching. We'll catch you later. Peace.